So I want to welcome everybody to today's Munch and Learn. You're in for a real treat. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. If you have any questions, you can type them in the chat, and we'll carve out a few minutes at the end to ask Tim any questions that you might have that occur to you during the presentation. Kristen, is there anything else in terms of housekeeping that I need to bring up?
We are recording this. It's not recording y'all's screens though, just the speaker's screen. So it will be on our YouTube channel, and you'll find all of our other Munch and Learn's recording there. So I can send that link to everyone.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. All right. Well, today, like I said, we're in for a real treat. Tim Wood has been breeding plants and involved in the nursery industry and the public garden world originally for many, many years. And today he's going to talk to us about some of the great stuff they're doing at Spring Meadow Nursery in terms of plant breeding with hydrangeas. So in Memphis, of course, we have the Mid-South Hydrangea Society. There's a lot of interest in hydrangeas here. And so this is a good topic and a timely topic, as the macrophyllus are really showing off right now, as well as the arborescens here in our garden. But Tim is a garden writer, he's in product development and marketing. He's the manager of that at Spring Meadow Nursery. And Spring Meadow Nursery is really good about sharing plants with public gardens to trial them. And so anyway, we're just really thrilled and honored to have Tim here today to tell us more about his program. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Tim.
Thank you, Dale. Certainly a pleasure to be here. And I know from visiting your area before, I really appreciated the garden and the work that you're doing down there. And I think it's really important for communities to have an organization like your own that inspires people to garden and grow plants. It's just a very healthy and wondrous type of activity to see plants, to appreciate plants, and to make the world a more beautiful place as a result of it. So what I want to do today is kind of give you a little overview of the things that we're doing in terms of plant breeding. But you know, the things that we're doing today are not, you know, they're not things that we've just started from the beginning. We have people that we have relied upon earlier, and we lean on these people. And one of them, you may have heard of the name Von Sybold. This is Philip Von Sybold. I'm in a garden in Leiden in the Netherlands. And this is an interesting person. He was a German physician. He worked for the Dutch East India Trading Company, and he was stationed in Japan on a small island off the coast of Nagasaki. And he did one thing particularly well that the Japanese appreciated, and that was he knew how to do cataract surgery. And it was greatly appreciated and valued by the Japanese people that he could restore eyesight to people and improve their eyesight. And as a result of this, they actually gave him many gifts, and they gave him many privileges. And one of those was the ability to go onto the island and to collect plants and to send plants back to the US. So you maybe recognize some plant names that have Syboldiana in them, like a Viburnum Syboldiana is an example. Berberis Syboldiana, and these plants are in honor of Von Sybold. And one of the plants that he brought back, you can see on this herbarium specimen on the left-hand side of the picture, is Viburnum Paniculata. And you can see that it's not a fancy-looking plant. Here you can see Von Sybold with his Japanese wife and child standing watching one of the ships laden down with plants and herbarium specimen and other collectibles about Japanese life on a boat heading back to Europe. And so it begins. We have the first opportunity to see and grow Hydrangea Paniculata. And one of the cultivars actually that he sent the first cultivar, not just wild species, but he actually sent this particular variety back to Europe in 1862. And you may recognize it. It's still in gardens today. This is PG Hydrangea, Paniculata Grandiflora. And a beautiful plant, very reliable, but you can see that it's kind of a cascading kind of plant because it doesn't really hold the blooms up really well. But it is a beautiful plant, and it is, in fact, just until probably 10 years ago, you could find it in the nursery catalog. But fortunately, there have been people that have recognized the qualities of this plant and have started breeding with it. And part of this came about because there's so many people that are interested in hydrangeas that really cannot grow them successfully. Now, in Memphis, you can grow them, and you're fortunate that you can grow them and have blooms on them most years. But there's a lot of the United States that cannot grow them. We have frost that kills off all the flower buds in the early spring. And so as a result, you know, we have this hydrangea envy. And even in places like where you're at, I mean, there are years when you get your buds frosted off your hydrangeas, and it's always disappointing. So Hydrangea Paniculata gives us a plant that's really well adapted to a continental climate like we have here in most of the US. And then we had, finally, after years, people taking an interest in breeding Hydrangea Paniculata. I remember my first copy of Durr's manual, where Mike Durr, under the listing of Hydrangea Paniculata, he said basically this plant has no garden merit. And, you know, which is amazing to me that he said that, because I think it's really one of the best garden plants you can own. And I think that was seen by Jelena de Belder. She was a botanist and plant collector who lived in Belgium. She was married to a diamond broker. And as a result of that, she would travel around the world with her husband, who was selling diamonds. They lived close to Antwerp, which is known for selling diamonds. But she was getting into places in the countries, in the places like the USSR, and getting into North Korea, and going to all around the globe and collecting seed wherever she went. She's known for introducing varieties like Hydrangea Unique, and Hydrangea Unique was probably the most significant plant that was introduced from Paniculata, and a lot of newer varieties then came forward, such as Pink Diamond and Little Lamb, and she's probably introduced about 30 other varieties that you've never heard of. But she was a remarkable woman, and unfortunately she died about 8 years ago, and sadly missed, because she was a really great plants person. And then just a little bit down the road, also in Belgium, was Johan Von Hollenbrook, and he works for a state breeding station, and he started developing some hydrangeas of his own and on the paniculatas, and he developed Hydrangea Bobo, which is really quite remarkable, and that it's this just perfect ball, puff ball of flowers, and blooms early. You barely can see the green leaves on the plant, and really makes it a very usable plant in the landscape. Someone sent me this picture up in Toronto of Bobo planted along a major thoroughfare. Seems, you know, a little close to the side of the road for a city that has snow, but it could work in an area where you don't get a lot of snow, and a very beautiful display of Bobo. You know, and making changes like this to hydrangea allows you to use them in totally different ways. And so instead of, just planting one specimen plant, you're using it as a ground cover. And so new breeding can do that. He also bred Hydrangea Pinky Winky, a remarkable plant, semi-dwarf, beautiful coloration where it starts at the bottom of the bloom and works its way to the tip. And I think makes a great plant. And of course, Peter's Wannenberg. And unfortunately, Peter also passed away just last year. And that was quite a shock to me. He was a good friend. And you would know Peter's work because he introduced Limelight Hydrangea, I think the most popular hydrangea in the world. No matter where I go, I mean, if you go to Russia, if you go to Ukraine, if you go to China, you go to Japan, if you go to Michigan, you know, any subdivision, you will find Limelight being grown there. But he's also introduced a fair number of other varieties, and he was a remarkable plantsman, and we're forever indebted for his plant breeding and his contribution to Hydrangea Paniculata. Beautiful plant, and what's probably most remarkable about this plant, and it was one of the earlier ones that we introduced, but what's really remarkable is this and Pinky Winky, you know, and unique. What makes them unique is that the flowers don't flop over like you had on Paniculata, Grandiflora, PG. And also what was really helpful in making this plant a success was not that it had green flowers, but a grower could put a liner in a 3-gallon and finish a blooming plant in one growing season. And it was strong enough to hold the blooms up in a container, and they could make a lot of money selling it. So they really liked it for that reason. But it is obviously a great plant. And I think it was a great starting point in terms of awakening people to the beauty of Hydrangea Paniculata. So it doesn't have a lot of interesting fall coloration, and I do some breeding as well. This is a plant I developed. It's called Firelight Hydrangea, and really working on blooming plants that bloom early and change to pink early. So Firelight is one particular variety that I developed. Also developed Little Lime Hydrangea. So Limelight's a big plant. I mean, it's can be easily get to 10, 15 feet tall in your garden if you don't do a lot of pruning on it. And so it doesn't always work around your house. I see people plant it next to their house, but it can get quite big, and you have to do a lot of pruning to keep it down. And Little Lime is a lot easier to manage. Also has better fall color than you get on Limelight as well. And then also we've continued to do breeding and just introduced probably, I guess, 3 or 4 new varieties. And we've looked at Limelight and have, you know, had a checklist of things we wanted to improve on Limelight, and finally got them and introduced 2 years ago, Limelight Prime. So this is the plant that's probably now available in garden centers at a reasonable amount of this spring. That you can find it. It has that beautiful same coloration that you get with Limelight. Note also about it, this is the original plant out in our seedling field. Notice a couple of things. One, how dark the foliage is. Limelight has this tendency, I don't know if you've noticed it on yours or not, but I get it on mine, where it tends to show manganese deficiency or magnesium deficiency. I'm not sure which one it is. It's probably one or the other, probably magnesium, I think, is the issue. And you get some chlorotic leaves on the plant. This plant has solved that. It doesn't get any of that chlorotic nutrient deficiency that you see on Limelight. We've also, you can see the stems are very stout, and so we've made it actually, the stems even stronger. And you can see the contrast between the flowers and the dark foliage really shows the blooms off very well. It's a bit more compact as well, so it doesn't take up as much room. It's about 1/4 the size smaller. It also holds its green coloration better. In the south, particularly in your area, you will notice that Limelight probably goes to white before it goes back to green when the flowers age. And so here we have a picture of Limelight on the left and Limelight Prime on the right. And you can see that it holds the green coloration longer. Here, another look in our test field. Limelight is the tall plant in the background. And Limelight Prime is the variety in the foreground. So you can see more compact, but again, holding the blooms up quite nicely, holding its color, really nice dark green foliage, and also improved autumn coloration. So you will get better pink coloration on it, and will actually be quite nice. And you can see again, limelight in the background, looking not so fantastic, and doesn't really have consistent year-to-year fall coloration, where Limelight Prime will have better coloration. Firelight Tidbit is a dwarf variety, kind of more in line with Bobo. It starts out with green flowers. It's a little flatter than Bobo, a little bit more mounded. And it has just very nice early transition to pink. It's not an early bloomer, but it's early in terms of opening up the flower and then going to pink. And you can see, if you look closely, you can see new flowers coming still, and you can see flowers that are already starting to turn pink. So again, a very useful plant for the front of the border, and it just makes a very nice kind of puffball of blooms, and really nice kind of strawberry, cherry kind of coloration, along with the creamy green blooms. Makes for a whole new use of how you're going to use Hydrangea paniculata. Really kind of getting it down into the size of a Hydrangea macrophylla, and making us, or giving us the opportunity to use it in similar situations. So again, as the fall color progresses, it can be quite nice. Firelight Tidbit, that's a new one. Quickfire Fab. Quickfire is a plant that we introduced in Proven Winners probably about 15 years ago. It came from the Netherlands, and it has kind of more of a lace cap flower. Quickfire Fab is more of a full mophead flower. And the reason why we kept it in the same family as Quickfire is that it flowers early. And growers really like flowering, the ones that they can flower and get into the garden center in the springtime in bloom. You can't really do that with Limelight. You're usually selling a green plant on Limelight, often in the garden center, where Quickfire Fab, you can have it in bud and bloom in May in a garden center. So it has really nice coloration. The blooms are large, they hold up well. You can see that it's starting to get that transition like you get with a Pinky Winky, with the pink at the bottom, and starts to move its way up. And then I should also note it has really nice branching. And this is an example of, you know, how we do some of our trialing. We do a trialing process in container as well in the field, and we look at how well the plant presents. Does it hold the blooms up well? Is the branching improved? How many flowers do we get? When does it start blooming? All of these things we're looking for improvement. And then the fall color is really what's quite spectacular. Just like a Pinky Winky, I mean, it goes through that coloration from the bottom to the tip, and you get this two-tone flower of both pink and white, and a little bit of green, in fact, and really is quite remarkable in terms of its overall flower color. This is a plant that, you know, I'm most proud, one of the plants I'm most proud of in our breeding program here. And another one I think that's going to be also quite popular is Little Lime Punch. It's kind of like a little lime in terms of its habit. It's a dwarf plant, semi-dwarf, you know, not as small as Bobo, but much smaller than a lot of other varieties on the market. Very strong stems. And Little Lime Punch is interesting because you end up with these multiple different flower colors on the plant at the same time. Again, the flowers very quickly go from a green to a white to a pink, and it also continues to put out new flowers. So it's got some continuous blooming attributes to it. And then you end up with this multiplicity of different bloom colors all on one plant, and a nice compact plant as well. Here's the original plant in our trial bed. You can see it's about half the size, or maybe 1/3 of the size of a typical Hydrangea paniculata. Nice tight flowers, strong stems, and the consistency of the bloom is quite remarkable in that they almost feel like grabbing a football. They're so dense, so thick. It's just an incredible plant. I mean, just to even touch the blooms is a really exhilarating experience, and cutting them and bringing them in the house, they're just perfect for this as well. So Little Lime Punch is, you might be able to find this on the market in select locations. We had it out for over a year now, from a liner to a grower. So there may be some plants available, probably more likely just online. But this fall, you'll begin to see more and more of this on the market. It certainly is a great addition. And it's like, you know, you think that like you get to a point where you just say, you know, these plants cannot get any better. And yet we continue to find attributes that make them better garden plants, more interesting, and just really easier plants to grow. So we're being very finicky about the plants that we introduce. We know that there's a lot of people introducing Hydrangea paniculatas, you know, but we also feel like when we put a plant in the Proven Winners program, it's very important. It looks like the plant I'm standing in front of, instead of the one that's on the right-hand side there with the long stems, and you know, that when the blooms are full open and they fall over. So we are very exacting in what we introduce and making sure that the plants are of the highest quality and they're not just Me Too plants. So this is kind of a summation of the 4 paniculatas that we've introduced in the last couple of years. We have other plants that are in the pipeline, so keep an eye out for what's coming. And I think you're gonna enjoy having these plants. They're just so easy to grow, and I love proving Mike Durr wrong. That's one of my favorite things to do. And he has changed his book, and I think that he realizes that, yeah, he's introduced a few Hydrangea paniculatas of his own. So he knows that this is a garden-worthy plant, and it's really a great garden plant because of the breeding that has taken place, you know, since 1862. A lot of changes have been made since PG, Hydrangea paniculata, Grandiflora, and a lot of positive changes. So easy to grow plants, strong branching, spectacular colors, and people are tired of hydrangeas that don't flower. And again, so this plant is just so reliable that you just cannot go wrong with it. Anyway, moving on to different species of hydrangeas. This is my friend Ushiro. He's a plant breeder in Japan. And he breeds normally petunias and things like this for the Proven Winners brand. But he also loves hydrangeas and started breeding hydrangeas. You may know, you know, his Super Vista bubblegum petunia and all of the different supertunias that are out there, super benas. I mean, those are all plants that he developed. He developed Fairy Trail Bride. And this is really the first cascading form of hydrangea. It's a complex hybrid between an Asian species and Hydrangea macrophylla. You know, there's a little, it's probably most closely related to Hydrangea scandens in terms of what species we're talking about he crossed it with. But there is a lot of differences in the nomenclature of Japanese and Chinese species of hydrangea than we are familiar with. And there's a lot of species of hydrangeas that we have not seen or grown, that we've only seen maybe herbarium specimens of. So I'm not quite sure what the exact species is of what he crossed macrophylla is, but the thing that's quite interesting about this plant is that he is getting flowers at every node, which is quite remarkable. It was so unusual. It won the Best Plant Award at the Chelsea Flower Show several years back. And again, what makes it so unusual is you see that it has these cascading stems. And if you look at the each one of these nodes, you get a flower bud, creating a very unusual plant. Now, originally I put zone 7 on this plant when we introduced it based on our earlier trials. I think it actually is probably more of a zone 6 because I think it's just a zone 6, but you need to site it properly. And I would site it in a location where it does not get morning sun. The plant was hardy for us here in Michigan in zone 5. So it could actually be a zone 5 actually. But we're still collecting data. And we lost the flowers only because of a spring frost. Okay, and if we hadn't had a late spring frost, it would have flowered for us. And we had a very cold winter this year as well. So we got down into like -10, -12. And not a lot of snow cover, and our plants were completely alive up and down the stems, where even a lot of our macrophyllus had died back to the ground. And so I think there is good hardiness to this plant. It's just that it's very susceptible to spring frost. So if you plant it in a location like the north side of the house, where it doesn't get morning sunlight, but it gets afternoon sunlight, I think that you can grow this plant successfully in your area, and maybe even in my area. We're learning more and more about it. You can grow it as a hanging basket. So it's just growth habit is so unusual. You can put it on the side of a rock garden and have it cascade down the rocks or along the side of a wall. It's just a remarkable plant. Looks great in a container. And I would recommend also growing it this way. Just a beautiful, pure white flower, sometimes a little bit of blue, sometimes a little bit of pink. If you keep the pH neutral, it usually will stay a nice, pure white. So it blooms at every node, very useful, and good siting is required for Fairy 12 Bride. Ushiro is doing more breeding in this area, so we hope to have different colors. We hope to have plants with mophead flowers like this as well. So we will see. Very exciting in terms of what's going on in this interspecific hybridizing. This is a look at some of the breeding that we do here at Spring Meadow, and this is our breeding facility. And the plant that you're looking at here is an unreleased Hydrangea macrophylla in our breeding program. But I want to tell you about how we evaluate our plants. We actually cut them all to the ground in fall, simulating an early frost. And then, so all of these plants, these 4 rows you're looking at, have all been cut back to the ground in November. And then the 2 rows on the right, we actually, after the plants start showing flower buds in May, we cut them to the ground again. And a typical hydrangea will do exactly what is happening in this photograph. You will see no flowers or very few flowers. And this is what we do not want to introduce in our breeding program. Now, looking at the plants that we do select, this is more like the results that we are looking for. So the 2 rows on the left were cut back once in the autumn. The 2 rows that you're looking at on the right were cut back twice, simulating a fall frost and a spring frost. And then also you'll notice that we've, 2 of the rows have been given bluing as well. That's why we have 4 rows. So this is a new variety that we've introduced called Let's Dance Big Band. And this is the initial process that in all of the Let's Dance breeding that we go through. Okay, from this point, then we move the plants out into the garden and out into a field. So we have 2 outdoor locations. One is zone 6 and one is zone 5. And we want to see the plant actually flower consistently for 2 to 3 years after going through this initial trial for 2 years. We want to see this for 2 years in the greenhouse. We want to see 2 to 3 years out in the field and out in the garden, that we have garden performance, a Hydrangea macrophylla that flowers reliably in Michigan. And I think that if it flowers reliably in Michigan, it'll flower reliably in Tennessee. These plants are all bred using remontant genetics, meaning that they will bloom on new wood. But in addition to being hybridized with blooming on new wood, we're also breeding for plants that will flower from low on the plant. So the flowers you're looking at here now, and this is probably in May or early June, you're basically looking at plants that are blooming on old wood. It's old wood that's located very close to the ground. So most hydrangeas, or like hydrangeas like macrophylla, like I showed you in slide number 1, back here, they don't make flower buds all the way up and down the stem. They don't make flower buds except for up at the top of the branching, okay? These make flower buds up and down the stem, so if they get frosted, they will flower. So in addition to this, after you get your first bloom, which is on old wood, you start to get a second bloom, which is buds that are located below the ground that are protected from the frost. Then as you move into midsummer, you begin to see the remontant blooms coming, and that's the reblooming. So the goal of Let's Dance is to have spring, summer, and fall, not just late season remontant bloomers. So another look at big band, big flowers. We're working on intensity of flower color. Again, these are plants in container. Can you imagine telling a grower, cut them back twice before you flower them? They would never do that. So I don't know if I have a grower that actually believes me that you can do this, but you can. And that's what the results that you get. Not bad for a hydrangea macrophylla being cut back twice at the wrong time. So big band has really nice intense flower coloration, either a dark pink close to a red or a purplish blue. So I'm just going to move on past this. And I want to talk about this plant, Let's Dance Can Do. And it points to another thing that we're doing in our breeding at Spring Meadow, is that we are also introducing a lot of Hydrangea Serata blood into our breeding. And Hydrangea Serata is native to more inland locations in Asia, Korea, Japan, China. So it's not just coastal maritime genetics like you get on your typical macrophylla. Now there's a lot of geneticists or, taxonomists that'll say that there is really no difference between a macrophylla and a serata, but there is a difference. And the biggest difference is the hardiness and when the flower buds swell and open in the spring. They're less likely to be frosted. And Let's Dance Can Do is, and any of the Let's Dance series that we've introduced probably over the last 5 years, every year they get stronger and stronger in terms of the amount of blooming that they do. And so they get better hardiness, better stem hardiness, better blooming, better remontancy. And we're also looking at the time of remontancy. How long does it take? How many nodes does it take before it makes new remontant blooms? Let's Dance Can Do is the fastest remontant variety that we have. Here you can see the plant is making new flowers even while the plant is coming out with its first flower. Before those have faded, we're getting new buds coming out from underneath it. It is the most prolific rebloomer that we have seen yet. And here you can see the plant. The blooms that you're seeing right here are actually the second blooms. If you look deep down in the plant, you can see some of the earliest blooms. And then you can see the number of buds that just continue to come on this plant. It is like nothing else that I've ever seen. Here you can see in the autumn, these are plants that we've trimmed and planted out in front of our office. You can see they have beautiful fall color and they're still making flowers, even up into autumn. See, the quickness of rebloom is getting better and better all the time. So, I mean, it's pretty interesting, that, 20 years ago, it's the same story we have with Paniculata. PG hydrangea was introduced. And since that time, a lot of great breeding has been done. And the species has been changed a lot. And, 23 years ago, Endless Summer was introduced, the remontant hydrangea was introduced. And now, after 20 years of breeding, the plants have continued to get better and better. So Let's Dance Can Do, another, I think, really fun and interesting plant out of our breeding program. So really, it's not reblooming. Yeah, I see it as continuous blooming is what we're going for now. Also in that line is a newer variety called Let's Dance Ariba. It's also a hybrid between Serata and Macrophylla. This is a garden, our test garden in Michigan. And all of the pink varieties that you see there are Ariba. And you'll see plants in the foreground and the background with no flowers at all. And those plants are not reliable flowers in Michigan and were not introduced. So again, they go through this same process of being trimmed once, being trimmed twice. Do they bloom? Do they flower? How quickly do they bloom? And this plant does fabulous, as you can see here. And the speed to rebloom is quite remarkable. So this is what you're looking at here, primarily not rebloom, but you will see rebloom later on it. And some of the smaller buds might be reblooming at this point in time, but primarily this is low buds on the plant coming forward with new flowers. This is rebloom. These are stock plants where we've gone through and taken cuttings off these stock plants probably about 5 times, and you're still seeing flowers on our stock plants. They just keep coming. And our growers actually complain about these plants because, they want to take a cutting without a flower. And so they have difficulty now finding, cutting wood that's not flowering, and it really kind of inhibits the rooting and makes it harder to grow a plant because it's flowering so often. So Let's Dance Ariba, again, really super fast in terms of reblooming, pink and kind of an orangish pink and a blue violet. But I love how that green is in the center as the flowers are coming out, and then eventually goes to a solid. And we had a line of plants called City Line, which are some of the best looking container plants on the market. Now, we introduced this new series, Wee Bit, and we have Wee Bit Giddy and Wee Bit Grumpy. And the idea is to replace City Line. City Line is really a plant that was developed for the florist market and is not a very reliable garden plant. And so the Giddy series is the next best evolution of City Line in terms of good dwarf, intense flowering plants like you get with City Line, but better, more reliable blooming. Again, we put them through the same breeding program that we put our Let's Dance through. They're not the same level of reblooming and reliability, but they're much better than they were with City Line Vienna, City Line Paris. And so eventually the City Line are slowly going away because we have better genetics than the City Line that was, again, is probably 20 years old. So Giddy and Grumpy are both excellent plants. Giddy makes a great pink or dark pink, or you can even get red on it, depending on the climate. And this is probably a better rebloomer than Little Bit Grumpy. Little Bit Grumpy is a little bit smaller plant, but very similar, and probably a better blue than purple. But again, you can see the intensity of color we don't have on the strongest rebloomers as of yet. It seems like when you dwarf these plants down, it's almost counterintuitive to the reblooming, because you need to get new growth. You need to get growth to get reblooming and new stems. So there's finding a balance, which is a little bit more difficult. And this is really a replacement for City Line. So hopefully you see more plants under the Wee Bit series, and that you have an understanding. These are florist quality plants with really good garden quality performance. They do have remontancy to them, but they are not going to be to the level of an Ariba or a Can-Do or a Big Band. Okay. And one last plant that is in the hybrid Serata, Macrophylla breeding, tough stuff, is been typically a series of Hydrangea Serata. This is really just, in my mind, a beautiful plant. I love the colors. I love the size of the individual blooms. Very reliable in the garden. You can see it has kind of that dark, dusty Serata type blood in it. And also, I think, really attractive in terms of presentation, whether it's in the ground or whether it's in the container. So again, it's kind of an improvement over Let's Dance Diva. How are we doing on time? Anybody?
I think we can take some questions.
Well, I do have a few other plants that I can talk about if I have time.
Let's see, what time is it now? Yeah, let's go. How about 6 minutes on that? 6 or 7 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, I want to talk about a native. This is Hydrangea arborescens, subspecies radiata. You can see it grows down your way, and nice native plant. This is a new introduction we made last year called Invincible Lace. It's really the first pink lace cap Hydrangea arborescens on the market. It's a little bit more of a pinkish purple than it probably shows here. What I like about this plant is it looks great in more of a naturalistic type of garden. It looks great mass planted. The stems are very strong. They're wiry, they're red in color, and it just makes, I think, for a very beautiful, elegant looking landscape, particularly in a naturalized setting. Sometimes the big mop heads don't give you that look that you want in more of a natural garden. And so Invincible Lace, I think, is going to be very reliable and a very good bloomer and a tough as nails plant. Subspecies Radiata, I think, also does better in the heat of the south in full sun and takes more sun than straight arborescens, subspecies arborescens. So look for that coming out. There you get a look at the close-up of the bloom. Also, if you like bringing pollinators into your garden, it's got a lot more pollen for the butterflies and the other insects. So Invincible Lace, you can be looking out for that. A lot of great breeding on arborescens. As you've known, Tom Rainey at NC State University introduced the Invincible series, starting with Invincible Spirit. His newest one is called Invincible Garnetta. The plants are getting more compact. The flower colors are getting richer. The foliage is getting better with each new introduction. So I think some really fabulous plants. The further you go south, the more shade that you need to put them in. And if I've been hiking down in the Smokies, for example, seeing Hydrangea arborescens growing there, and you normally see it in a location where there is sun coming through, where maybe a tree fell down. So they're plants that do like sun, and they're not going to bloom well in shade, but they do want a half a day's sun. So like afternoon sun or morning sun, either one doesn't matter. A half a day of sun is good for the plant and will bloom and hold up better in hotter climates than they will if they're in the full sun. Up in Michigan, we can grow them in full sun. We don't have the heat and humidity that you have down there. But very reliable bloomers, blooms on new wood. Most all of Tom's plants too are quite unique in that, and different from Annabelle, in that you can cut them back to the ground after they're flowering, or cut off the old blooms and they will flower a second time. And so you can actually rebloom them, where you can't do that with an Annabelle. So I love the foliage quality on Garnetta. It's getting glossier. So quite remarkable in terms of bloom color, compactness. It's a later blooming variety than Ruby. And I think the stems are also stronger than Ruby as well. So a nice introduction. So that ends my talk today. If you like learning about new plants, I write a blog. It'll never spam you if you subscribe. You're only going to get about 3 or 4 updates a year on it. I tend to do more social media these days, so but I still do and hope to do more on the Plant Hunter blog. It's been fun talking hydrangeas with you today. Obviously, it's a big group of plants, and you know, I could talk for a whole semester on hydrangeas. They're fascinating plants. The breeding that's going on is quite remarkable. But I think some of the things that you've seen today are plants that will be either coming to the market this spring or next spring, and you'll be able to find in the marketplace and be able to grow them yourselves and see some of the trends that are coming. And so anyway, we do have time, I think, hopefully for a few questions, if you have any.
All right, here. I think there's several questions. Let's see. Do you have any recommendations on pruning oak leaf hydrangeas?
Yeah, I mean, oak leaf hydrangeas, they bloom on old wood. Okay, so basically if you're going to prune the plant, you want to prune them, if you don't want to lose flower, you want to prune them, you know, just after they're done flowering. Okay, now kind of like Hydrangea macrophylla, you know, a lot of times these hydrangeas, they bloom so long, or the old blooms still look good for such a long period of time, you really don't want to cut them back all the time. And so you can do rejuvenation pruning. That means, like, if you want to lower the size of the plant, neaten it up, you'll get suckering at the bottom or the base of the plant. You will get basal shoots. And so take out just like 1/3 of the tallest stems and let some light get into the base of the plant. And then you won't sacrifice the blooming of a particular year, but eventually after 3 years, you will have removed a lot of the big rangy looking stems and rejuvenated it with newer, younger sucker growth from the base of the plant. So that's a good way to bring the plant down in size. And a lot of times, you know, oak leaves can look a little bit gnarly, you know, on those old stems, and they can grow kind of in odd directions at times. So kind of rejuvenating them every once in a while can be very easy, just by taking out 1/3 back to the ground each year and letting some of the sucker growth replace it.
All right, another kind of a comment, I guess, comment/question. Fairy Trail Bride, if no morning sun in zone 7, could it actually take afternoon sun in Memphis?
Yeah, I think it can. I mean, Tokyo, actually the breeding is south of Tokyo. It's more like Nagasaki. Japan is hotter than your area. I mean, Tokyo is miserable in the summertime, and Nagasaki is even further south. It's even hotter. So it can take sun. And a lot of hydrangeas, if you can give them water, you know, water is really more the key in many respects. But a half a day sun is, I think, going to be fine with Fairy Trail Bride. I think it'll take afternoon sun if you can give it water. Obviously, it'll do well in your area with dappled shade and sun. It will do well in those locations as well. But I think the most important thing is that it doesn't get morning sun, because what happens is in a continental climate, you get a frost and then the sunlight comes out, and it's the frost thawing that causes the ice in the cells to expand and cut the cells and cause damage. So that's the reason why I say, you know, don't let it get any morning sun. And you can give it afternoon sun, and obviously the further south you go, probably the more shade, the more helpful it is. But it is from a hot area. Okay, it is not. This is not like a plant that's native to or was not bred up in the mountains or up in Michigan. The genetics are not from Michigan, so it can take the heat. It is from a hot climate to begin with. But most importantly, just don't let the buds get frosted in the spring, and you'll have good hardiness and you will get bloom. So I looked at some plants today that we had in a full shade location up here in Michigan. It is blooming right now, but it's not blooming hard. And part of that is because plants in full shade don't bloom hard. They don't, you know, so plants do need some sunlight to flower. Otherwise, you're just going to grow moss and ferns in deep shade. Not many flowering plants in deep shade. Okay, got to balance it.
So a follow-up question that somebody sent after that one was ultimate size on Fairy Trail Bride. I guess in terms of height, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the tallest plant that I've seen is about probably 2.5, maybe 3 feet tall, but it's going to grow wide. I mean, it's going to be wider than tall. And so the original plant is probably in the 3 to 3 foot max range, but it's probably more like 6 feet wide.
Okay. I think that's it for the questions, but I just have something that I was going to say, and that is, you know, we have a plant sale here at the Dixon every year as a fundraiser for the gardens, and we try to offer new, unusual, and, you know, we don't have huge numbers of anything, but we kind of use it as a vehicle to get new stuff out into the Memphis gardens, hands of gardeners here in Memphis. So anyway, we might be reaching out to you to see if we can't get some of these things that are in limited numbers for that sale. We'd love to offer some. And I tell you, there's hydrangea fever has swept over Memphis in the past 10 years. I can truly say that. So.
Well, I know you have a good active Hydrangea Society there, and you have a great collection at the garden. So I think all of that is helping to fuel that. And yeah, I mean, they're just beautiful plants and such interesting genetic diversity within one species. And then even within one species, great genetic diversity in terms of the breeding. So it's really a fun group of plants and fun to grow, a little bit of a challenge sometimes, but there's easy plants to get you started, and there's, you know, some that are a little bit more difficult to challenge a gardener. And there's lots of support, you know, whether it's on the Proven Winners, Color Choice Facebook site, you can get answers. I'm sure that you can get answers from the people at the garden down there at Dixon, or the Hydrangea Society. I mean, there's lots of people out there willing to help people get involved in growing and being successful at growing hydrangeas.
Well, all right. Well, thank you so much for your fascinating lecture, and thank you for everything you're doing for the world of horticulture up at Spring Meadow. So we're excited.
Having fun. Everybody have a great day. And thanks
so much, Tim. I'll be in touch soon. Bye-bye.
Yep, bye.